Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager and your host for Sterling Live. I'm so excited to be back for yet another episode. It's been a very busy summer for us on Sterling Live. We've had amazing episodes so far this summer, and I can't wait for today's. We've got even more coming into August and September for you. So I'm so excited today to be joined by Kurt Campbell. He is a sales leader within our technology and business services group. And as you can see on the bottom, this is our topic today. We're going back to basics here with background screening. We're going to talk about navigating core elements of a background check. So again, we're getting very educational today. We're doing the basics, but it's going to be super informative. So Kurt, this is your first time on Sterling Live, and I've been waiting for you to come on with me. So I'm so excited to have you here. So let's talk about you for a little bit. I want to get you introduced to our audience. You've been with us for 13 years. So can you tell a little bit about what you've been doing at Sterling for, 13 years, what you're doing now, and then what your, the current industries that you cover? It's a lot.
Yes.
Right away.
Yes, absolutely. So first, let me say I was at the Kids Bop concert last night with my kids. So if I look tired or my voice is off, it was all that partying and dancing and singing at the Kids Bop concert. So
We're going to have to
apologize.
hear. Yeah, you're going to have to do a little sing along for us.
There you go.
End.
Yeah, a little sample at the end. So yes, 13 years that I've been with Sterling, and I've been in many different roles along the way, and it's been a wild ride as we've grown tremendously over the last 13 years. So currently, I oversee sales in our technology and business services vertical. So some of the practice areas that report up through me are technology, media, entertainment, hospitality, retail, staffing. So a wide variety, which is cool because I get to see and hear and talk to many different clients and prospects in many walks of life, which really provides some great insight into the market. So it's been a blast. I can't wait to continue to see what comes of it as we've now gone public, and it's a very exciting time for Sterling. So.
It really is. I mean, I think we're upwards of like 80 to 90 episodes of Sterling Live. And every episode we're talking about something new, something exciting. So
That's right.
I can't wait to continue that trend today.
And I've been waiting for my invite. So I'm happy to be here.
He's finally here, people.
That's right.
So just a quick reminder, if you are watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, if you have a question for Kurt throughout the episode, please go ahead and put it in the comment section across all three of these social media platforms, and I will get them over to him as I see fit throughout the episode. So as I said earlier, we are going back to basics, and it's so funny that you bring up that you were with your kids at a Kids Bop concert last night, because I saw my first back to school commercial the other day. So while it is July 26th, we're seeing those commercials out there, and I think it's a good trend for today because, again, we are going to be teaching some lessons here. We are going to
Absolutely.
be, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's talk about the basics of background checks. So to get the conversation kicked off, let's just do an overview of Sterling so people can get that. So we know that Sterling is known for background checks, but can you tell us a little bit about what Sterling does, a little bit more deeper into it and some of our products?
Yeah. So just to start with the theme being back to basics, right? So Sterling is a CRA, a consumer reporting agency. And I think one of the misconceptions of what that means, right, is people see consumer reporting agency and they think of credit reports, right? And while we do produce consumer reports, that just simply means we're providing information on an individual and producing that in a report, right? And so we are bound by the Fair Credit Reporting Act as a consumer reporting agency. And we do everything from the core criminal searches, which we're really going to dive into today, to truly innovating in some new areas. Things like identity verification, which has been a really hot topic in the industry, social media searches, ongoing monitoring, what's happening after these people get into your organization. Because historically, background screening has been focused heavily on pre-hire. And then they get into your organization and what happens, right? It's almost more important to understand what happens once they're actually in your organization. So we'll touch on monitoring a little bit, but our main focus will be on that core criminal component. But I think, Caitlin, I mentioned some of the areas that I oversee. as it relates to sales. And one of the things that I think has been truly impactful to Sterling and its clients in recent years, and I'll say 4 years ago ish at this point, it's so hard. Like I feel like COVID now has defined and
Yeah.
defined time expectations. Right now, it's just kind of like pre-COVID and
Yeah.
post-COVID. The number of years don't necessarily matter anymore, but it was pre-COVID. So I think about 4 years ago, what we did is we actually verticalized our
Mhm.
business. And so that's where the verticals that I oversee come in. But I think what this has really allowed us to do is have a much deeper expertise and focus in these practice areas, in these verticals that we help and we oversee. And so when I talk about the organization being defined and organized into these verticals, I don't necessarily mean just like the client facing folks, sales and client success that you would speak to here at Sterling. But even behind the scenes, we're going to talk about fulfillment today, and we're going to talk
Mhm.
about some of the other areas of the business. These verticals and this deep industry knowledge and expertise goes much deeper than just the client facing folks.
Right.
We're organized top to bottom in these verticals around these areas of expertise, around what we call these practice areas or verticals. And we've seen tremendous benefit to our clients, because everyone that you're going to interact with, everyone that has hands on your account, is intimately familiar with and understands the challenges that these types of organizations face within a particular vertical. We're able to benchmark against other companies very similar to those in the vertical. So it has really provided a tremendous benefit to our organization internally, but also to our clients as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a huge differentiator for Sterling. It is something that, we tout a lot, but for me, within the organization, it's easy for
I think we might have lost Caitlin's internet. So with that, she was talking about the differentiators. I'll continue on and just go with
me.
where we were going to go next, which is the overview of the criminal searches. Oh, I think she's back.
I am, and you did such a great job there.
All right. So
Yes.
want to dive into the overview on the crim searches?
We are doing an overview of criminal searches, so I want to get you talking right away,
Perfect.
obviously.
Very good.
Um, yes, so criminal checks obviously are bread and butter. Can you tell us a little bit about the core elements of a criminal background check?
Yeah. So I mentioned I'll start by actually talking about identity, because I
Okay.
mentioned it as a huge innovator above when we were talking, and I think the idea is we now, right, have introduced the identity solution into our core offering. Sterling believes so much in this product and where this is going in the industry and in the space today, that we believe it should be part of every core package and component of a background check that you do. And here's why, right? So a lot of times people feel like, and when I'm having these conversations, people will have conversations around the social security trace, right? Or even consent based social security verification. And they'll say, well, aren't we validating the social security number and someone's identity by running the social security trace? Or if we're doing consent based social security verification and we're going to the SSA, the Social Security Administration, aren't we validating and verifying someone's identity? And unfortunately, Caitlin, the answer is no, right? All we're simply doing in those instances is a best match scenario with things like SSN and name and all of that. But but even scarier, right? If I give you all of the information, let's say I've stolen Jim Smith's identity, and I give you all of the information for Jim Smith. It could be 100% accurate. Jim Smith's name, his date of birth, social security number, address, that could all be accurate for Jim Smith.
Mhm.
But I'm not Jim Smith.
Right.
I've stolen his identity.
Mhm.
And so the issue is bad information in equals bad information out. So whether it's a case of stolen identity, or whether that's just someone putting in bad information to trick the system, bad DOBs, date of births, SSNs, what have you, if we start the background check with bad information, the likelihood of bad results is much greater. Whereas if we use a product like Sterling's identity verification product, which really can scale anywhere from technology, they're the SIM card and phone verification, all the way through biographic data, right? So we can really scale the solution. But what it allows us to do is truly verify the identity of that individual. And now we start with really good quality information that is being put into the system, which allows us now to have much better results and a much better background check. So I want to make sure that we start with that, because even
Right.
even as of a few years ago, identity was not considered a core component of the background check. But we believe so strongly in it now that we think every background check should start with that core component.
Absolutely.
From that point forward, here's what I always like to talk to people about, because background screening can be boiled down to something really, really simple in my eyes. It comes down to locating and retrieving records, right? And so if we talk about the idea of background screening, we want to be able to uncover the footprint of this individual that you're screening. If we don't know where to look, we aren't going to find anything, right? And so the idea is, how can we understand the footprint of this individual? How can we look in as many places as possible to see if anything's there? So locating becomes really important. And I'm going to talk about retrieving later when we talk about our technology and our automation. But if we stick to locating for a moment, there's a couple locator tools that are really important that allow us to uncover this potential criminal activity. So the first would be the social security trace, right? What we want to understand is, where have they lived? Because we know that most criminal activity takes place in an area in which someone has lived. People commit crimes in their backyard, so to speak. So if we run that social security trace, that is going to give us an understanding of the counties in which they've lived. And counties, we all know, are the source of criminal information, right? It gets a little tricky in background screening. The further away you get from the source, it's kind of like the game of telephone that we all used to play when we're kids, right? The information just gets a little bit worse the further we get away from the source. So we always like to go back to the source as often as possible. So
Mhm.
we start with that social security trace. We understand the counties in which they've lived. We go search all of those counties. But what happens if a crime does take place outside of a county in which they've lived? People commit crimes on vacation. What happens in Vegas doesn't need to actually stay in Vegas, right? So, in those instances, we want to try to fill the gaps. And one of the ways we do that, and a product that I'm sure a lot of people that are listening are familiar with, is the National Criminal Search. And there's many different names of that search for, across the organization. But the idea is, it's this product that effectively throws a map out, or a net out, excuse me, over the entire country. And the idea is, let's try to catch anything that swims into that net outside of the counties in which these individuals have lived, which is great. But Sterling likes to take it to a third level, right? So most organizations present two levels of locator tools or risk mitigation. Sterling presents three. And the third one is really, really important. And it's called Locator Select. And now what we've been able to do with Locator Select is we've actually been able to partner with 2,500 plus additional jurisdictions. These are arresting and booking jurisdictions across the country. Now, I know red flags are probably going up with terms like arresting and booking, but I mentioned earlier, we're going to go back to the county and validate anything we find.
Right.
So the idea is, if all we're using this is, again, is a pointer, right? A locator tool. As I said, it comes down to locating and retrieving. So what this allows us to do is actually pick up 2,500 plus more stones to look under. So if the game is about finding more information, finding a better understanding of the footprint of this individual, if we have 2,500 additional stones that we can pick up and look under, we're going to find some things that others aren't finding, which
Right.
is really cool, which is really exciting, right? And so we have
Mhm.
seen where hit rates have gone up by significant amounts with some clients. And so if we add that third layer, and now we're providing three layers of risk mitigation, the chances of finding this information increases pretty dramatically. So I'm a visual learner, Caitlin, right? I like to kind of paint a picture. This is how I learn. So I like to kind of paint a picture for folks because I think it helps. So I'll give you a real life example. So let's say that someone lives in Oakland County, Michigan. Oakland County, Michigan sits just north of Detroit, Michigan, which is in Wayne County, right? So if I live, or this person lives in Oakland County, Michigan, right, and has never lived in Wayne County, let's say that they go down on a Sunday in the fall to watch their beloved Lions play, and they're playing the rival Chicago Bears. And a fight breaks out, and this person gets arrested, charged in Wayne County. Let's break this search down by component, right? So if we're running just that county criminal search off of the Social Security trace, that criminal activity is not going to be found. Why? Because that individual does not and has not lived in Wayne County.
Right.
So you won't find that information. You say, okay, well, it's fine because we have this national criminal search that we rely on to catch anything that doesn't come up where they lived. One of the challenges with the national criminal search is I mentioned it's like a net, right? That we throw out over the country. What's the problem with a net? It has holes. Yeah, it has holes, right? So some things swim through. Right. And we'll talk about some of the challenges in greater detail later. But the idea is many counties across the country do not report information into the National Criminal Search. Wayne County happens to be one that has limited or has reporting restrictions. So now, if you're running that traditional background search that you're used to running, the Social Security trace, counties off of that Social Security trace, and the National Criminal Product, that 2 layers of locating tools and risk mitigation, you're not finding that criminal activity. But when we add Locator Select, the arresting and booking jurisdictions in Wayne County are covered as part of Locator Select. So that criminal activity would be found. Again, we would go back now to Wayne County to validate the information, make sure it is legally reportable, make sure that it is uniquely your candidate, and we will then report out that information. And that's why we've seen the hit rates increase. So that's why we're super excited about some of those innovations and adding products like Locator Select for our clients, because we feel like it provides a much greater sense of security. And if we talk about what Sterling is takes pride in and what our mission statement is, right, we're looking to provide safer work environments and cultures for our clients. And we think this is a tremendous way to do just that.
Well, great example, because number one, you spoke about football, and I'm eagerly waiting for the NFL seasons to start, even though the Detroit Lions are not my team. Do love them though. It's great.
They're not mine either, but I just an example.
It's a great example. And then, the second reason why as well is just showing how Sterling does take it goes to the next level for our clients, to what you just said, creating a safer work environment. So we are uncovering all the details that your organization needs as you're bringing new people into the organization. So quickly, we did get a question, and we actually got 2 questions on LinkedIn. Just real quickly, for everyone who's watching and you're asking if this is going to be recorded. Yes, as soon as we're done with this, it's on demand immediately. So I will remind everyone though after the show as well. But yes, this is technically goes right on demand as soon as I'm done with Kurt today. And then someone had asked about the turnaround time on identity verification. And then also, are we recommending that over the standard Social Security number trace?
Yeah, so let me take the second one first, because the answer is unequivocally yes. Well, let me rephrase that. Yes, we are absolutely recommending it, but not in place of the Social Security trace. And the reason being is what I just talked about from a locator tool perspective. The trace provides us an undeniable tool that allows us to derive those counties in which these people have lived. So it still is a very vital piece of this locator puzzle and this core criminal component, because if we don't have that Social Security trace in there, right, then we won't necessarily understand the footprint of where they've lived over the last 7 years or 10 years or whatever you choose as your scope on that trace product. So yes, we do absolutely recommend the product because it serves a different function
Mhm.
than the social security trace. But the social security trace is a very important part and component of making sure that we continue to identify as many places as this person has been as possible.
Mhm.
As far as the first portion of it, the turnaround times are very, very quick. So again, the product and the options scale, but it is built into the systematic functionality of
Right.
the first portion of the background check, and it's built into the Sterling portal, right? And so as they're going through that, it becomes effectively a gating mechanism for them to pass identity and then move on with the rest of the search. So it is actually a near instant result. And
Right.
so we have found where what's really interesting is we have found where people are able to get through this process if they have a current login for identity. They're getting through it in 60 seconds or less. If they don't, it's usually 2 to 3 minutes. So it's a
Okay.
very quick information and information grab. And if they already have a login, then they're simply verifying the information that they've already put into that particular site.
Yeah, and just to like advance on that a little bit, obviously with a product like this, adding a new layer into,
Mhm.
our steps, candidate experience is always at the forefront for us. So, and we've done a ton of episodes on identity verification for Sterling Live. We have a ton of content on it. You can reach out anyone, to any one of us to talk about it further. But yes, it's like Kurt just said, it is super quick because we've always had that candidate in mind,
Absolutely.
making sure
Great
there
point.
is no it isn't taking longer. We want to get them hired. So yeah, so definitely keep that in
Great.
mind there.
Yep. Great point.
So you spoke about the locator, and that being a huge differentiator for us with our these types of criminal checks. Are there any other areas where we are different? And then any other considerations you think organizations should be thinking about with their entire program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I told you I would come back to the retrieval piece, right?
Oh,
Because I
he's back.
mentioned there were two pieces, the locate and the retrieve. So while finding all of the information is great, we've got to know what to do with it, and we've got to be able to retrieve that information quickly and accurately, right? That's what our clients would expect. So the retrieval piece is equally important, and I think what we've done a really good job of is kind of matching automation and technology and advancing in those areas. And so the retrieval piece, we pioneered a process known as Court Direct. And what Court Direct allows us to do is integrate directly with these court jurisdictions all across the country. We are upwards of 85% plus of county court jurisdictions that we're integrated with across the country. So imagine, right? We've taken and we've now built this electronic pipeline into these court systems all across the country. So you say, Kurt, that's great, but what does it really mean, right? What's the benefit? What does that mean to me? Well, by doing so, what we've done is we've eliminated in those jurisdictions the need for human touch, right? So
Yeah.
that can be that if we have to send the court runner in or someone makes an error, right? We are human, we make mistakes, so we send the court runner in and maybe there's a mistake that's made or someone fat fingers information, what have you. That's going to affect the results of the background check,
Right.
right? Or the turnaround time. And so by creating this electronic pipeline, what we've now been able to do is increase the quality and accuracy because of less error in data and reduce the turnaround times, right? So now we're getting you the information, we're finding more, right? Because we're locating more, we're
Right.
finding more, and then we're able to do it fast and accurate, which is obviously kind of table stakes in this space. So it's very important, right? So when you take and you pair that court direct retrieval method with our back end technology, and what's really really cool about Sterling and the innovation and frankly the investments that Sterling has made over the years, we continue to invest in our fulfillment pipeline because we think that it's important to own as much of our fulfillment pipeline as possible and be as little reliant on vendors and things of
Right.
that nature as possible, because then it allows us to control the flow of the information, right? And so by doing this, we have built our smart data technology effectively. And so what that allows us to do is standardize 750 plus different charges and statutes so we understand what is reportable. It's built into the systematic functionality of what is legally reportable in each of these states, right? We know how challenging it is to follow the ever changing landscape of litigation. We don't expect our clients to be, pros in that. That's what we do, and
Of
that's what we've
course.
built into this smart data technology and this systematic functionality. So it's allowing us to automate these things, and then it's allowing us to score it against your criteria. So if you have a scoring criteria that you like to use and say, hey, this is what we tend to be okay with, this is what we want to put extra eyes on and make sure we're reviewing a bit, a bit deeper, a bit more granularly, we can then score it and automate it against that information as well. So controlling the funnel from effectively top to bottom, where we're understanding what information to pull from these counties, what the court data looks like, what is acceptably reportable and not, right? All of that is automated through our fulfillment pipeline, and it returns. I talked about the idea of decreasing the turnaround times, right? Turnaround times going down. What we've seen because of this is 90% of these criminal searches that we get on a daily basis are done in house
Mhm.
and are automated, fully automated. And so what does that do to turnaround times? Or we see where about 93% of these criminal screens are completed in one day, and about 70% of them are completed in under an hour,
That's
because
great.
of this level of integration and automation that comes with the technology and the automation built into our systematic functionality. So again, the idea of locate and retrieve, if we take it back to those basics, right, which is the theme of today, if we can find more criminal activity, right, because we are adding that third layer of risk mitigation and picking up 2,500 plus additional stones to look under and see if there's anything there, and you pair that with the automation and the technology that ensures you're getting good quality information, legally reportable information, and we're doing it fast and very accurately, that's a great balance to have in a criminal screening process.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway there for our audience to understand is that we are speeding up the process for you. We understand there's timelines to meet. You got to get people in the door, you got to get them hired quickly, but we're not doing anything to skip out. You're getting
That's
even
right.
more. Kurt explained another layer that we're adding in for
That's
you. So, if
right.
anything, never, you could try to speed things up by, pulling things out, but we're adding things in, but still speeding up the process for you. So, huge takeaway there. And
Yeah.
I'm so, our audience definitely has to hear that.
When just to drive home that point, Caitlin, right? So when we talk about what this means to truly be integrated and own the fulfillment pipeline, when I mentioned COVID earlier, at the peak of COVID, Sterling was still fulfilling
Mhm.
in 98% of in jurisdictions across the country, right? We were still able to produce results on 98% of what was coming to us. And the reason was because of these deep integrations
Right.
and because of the fact that we own that fulfillment pipeline and being less reliant on others, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I love it. And quick plug here, we did actually just promote our fulfillment process. So if you are watching live on LinkedIn and Facebook, just scroll down the page a little bit. When this is
There you
over,
go.
obviously, don't leave Sterling Live right
Yes, please
now.
don't leave us.
Just scroll down. It's a couple posts down. It's a video. It beautifully describes our fulfillment process. So you will get even more detail into what Kurt has shared with us today.
Well, in 13 years, Caitlin, I'm nothing if not a company man. So
Yeah.
I knew that was there, and we could plug that.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into some misconceptions. We're going to see how much everyone was paying attention because we did detail out some of these earlier. So, and again, the whole idea, back to basics, back to school, we're going to have a little fun here. So, I have 3 common misconceptions for you for background screening. So, what I need you to do is say, yes, that's not true, and then provide more detail on it. So, the first one, Social Security number traces are used when pulling criminal records from the courthouse.
Yeah, so the answer effectively is no, right?
No.
Social security traces are simply designed, as I stated earlier, to give us an understanding of where to go, right? So all we're doing is we're using that social security trace to understand where has Kurt Campbell lived, where has Caitlin lived, and let's go search those counties to see if anything is there. So again, it simply serves as a pointer, a locator tool for us to understand the footprint of that individual, knowing and understanding through all of the years of data and analytics that we have that many criminal activities do take place where someone has lived.
Great. We did just get a comment on LinkedIn too, just saying how amazing it is 93% done in one day and 70% within the hour for these checks. So, whoop, whoop. Yes, awesome.
Yes,
I love it. All right. Misconception number 2. Social security number trace can be used to confirm the identity of a candidate. So, who was listening earlier? We spoke
that's right.
about this.
That's right. Hopefully we know the answer to this based on what I stated earlier, but it is not true, right? The social security trace doesn't actually specify that I am Jim Smith in that example I provided earlier, right? Because if I have all of Jim Smith's information and you're meeting me virtually and hiring me virtually, and I present you all of that information, you believe that I'm Jim Smith. But if we actually use the Sterling identity verification product, and again use things like the biographic data and things of that nature to truly understand the identity of someone, then that's a very very different instance than if we just simply use the social security trace. So no, that is false.
All right. And the last one, and the same thing, should have been listening earlier. The National Criminal Search has full coverage everywhere.
Yeah, Caitlin, I got to tell you, if I had $1 for every time that I was asked the question of, well, if the national criminal search covers the entire country, like, why do I need to run these other searches?
Right.
I would not be with you today because
No,
I would be retired. So,
not for
um,
another 13 you'd
that's
be.
right. That's right. I wouldn't have another 13 years ahead of me. So, no, that is certainly false. I mentioned it earlier, right? The problem, if we think of the national criminal search as a net that's thrown out over the entire country, Caitlin nailed it, right? The idea is nets have holes. And so we have to understand it certainly provides value, right? Because there are a number of counties that do report to this, and it is there is some quality information in there, and we do want to we want to catch anything that swims into that particular net.
Right.
But Sterling never recommends it as a standalone product in any capacity because we want to make sure that we are doing the most in-depth search we can. We want to make sure we're using source information again, like the county and what have you. So the National Criminal Search is not a standalone product. It does not provide full coverage. We do think it is tremendously valuable as as an additional asset, right? An additional component of the search. And when paired with those other core components we talked about earlier, the Social Security trace and counties off of that Social Security trace, the Locator Select product, and the National Criminal product, I think that's a really, really valuable way to make sure that we are covering as much of this background screening universe as possible. And I think that's one of the challenges as well. And maybe even one of the misconceptions is we feel like there a lot of times we think, or I've heard where background screening is as simple as like flipping this switch, right? I'm going to press a button and I'm going to get a background check, and there's some central repository out there that just has all of this criminal history in it, right? And unfortunately that's not that well fortunately for companies like Sterling, that's not the case, but unfortunately for clients and things of that nature, it's not the case. So we have to be able to cover as much of that background screening universe as possible. And it's important to recognize too that there is no perfect background check, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, our job is to help consult on how do we strike that right balance for each organization we work with. And this is where those verticals are really, really important, and the deep industry expertise is important. Is how do we help consult on, and how do we help organizations understand that balancing act between risk mitigation and the risk tolerance that an organization may have, right? And it's kind of like one of those old school scales that have like the buckets on each
Yeah.
side, and right, for each organization that scale is a little bit different. Some organizations are okay tolerating a little bit more risk, right? And they don't need to mitigate as much risk out of their process, while others need to mitigate every piece of risk they can possibly mitigate out of their process. So it's important for us to have these conversations, understand each organization that we work with, use our deep industry knowledge and expertise to say, here's what other organizations in your space are doing, and use some of that analytical benchmarking data that I mentioned earlier, and find the right place for each of our clients.
So we just ruled out 3 misconceptions. So everyone better have had their pen, their notebook out, writing that down. So we just told you guys it's not true. We gave you the reason why. I love that. I've loved everything about today's conversation as well. I think sometimes just doing the general information, the basics, just really getting that information out there is critical. And I think a lot of people want to hear it, need to hear it, things like that. So real quickly, again, if you are watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube right now, if you have any final questions for Kurt, please go ahead and submit them right now as we wait for any final questions to come through. Again, great episode, great content. But Kurt, I want to get some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I dive into some of the final thoughts, I want to leave people also with some things to think about beyond just those basic components
You're
that we
giving them
talked.
homework.
That's right. Some homework, right? Some takeaways. So there are some things that I find in conversations with our clients, with our prospects, that are really impactful to their screening program. And one of those is alias names, right? And I want people to think through how they're handling alias names today, and how important it might be for them if they're not screening them today. What happens if you're not screening an alias name, and that's where the criminal history actually lives, right? And so how are you handling alias names within your program today? And then how are the fees designed in your program? So are fees included on things? We talked about county searches, right? Companies can really design fee structures in many different ways. Are your fees included? Are they not included? Does that benefit you from an economic model for your organization? That's something we can have a conversation about. One of the other things that I think is tremendously important is, if your organization is global, what kind of consultative nature is your vendor providing to you on a global scale? Are they providing you things like global fact sheets that talk through recommendations and provide definitions of each of the products that are available in each of those countries, and provides a comprehensive score, confidence score, on the information that's obtained from each of these countries? And then client success as well. So from a client success standpoint, how is the organization that you're working with, how are they structured? I talked about the idea of being vertically organized within our structure here at Sterling, which I think is tremendously impactful. And you heard Caitlin say what a differentiator and what a benefit it has been to organizations that we work with. So just some things that I want to make sure that you take with you here today. But as it relates to the majority of the content and the heart of the content that we provided, I think I would wrap it with, again, saying, if you think about this as simply as possible when it comes to kind of the core components of your criminal screening, and you think about locating and retrieving, right? Can you locate as much information as possible and do it as quickly and as accurately as possible? And that's how if we think about our screening program through that lens, and we balance the right level of risk mitigation versus risk tolerance, you're going to be in really good shape. And then just remember that example when we come down to the end of, remember that example of Jim Smith, right? And the guy who lived in Oakland County, Michigan, versus the crime that happened in Wayne County, Michigan, because that's the direct impact of a product like Locator Select and being able to find and identify more criminal activity. So those would be the takeaways and the leave behinds.
I love it. All right. So we did actually get 2 questions in. So real quickly here off LinkedIn. So this is a good question because clearly some people fall out of that 93% and that 70% that we
Absolutely.
said earlier. So one individual would like to know, is there anything we can do as an employer to speed up the results when a candidate's background check is taking several weeks to order or to complete, excuse me?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question because we love collaboration, right? And I think the idea is understanding if this is a commonality, right? I think that's part of what we would dig into and try to look at and understand. Okay, is there any commonality amongst these ones that are taking long? And usually, what we see in those instances is it is a court that doesn't necessarily have coverage through Court Direct, which is again that integrated process of us going to retrieve these records, right? So it may be a court where runners are still needed, and there are some of those. I mentioned we're integrated with about 85-ish%, right? A little bit more. So the challenge is some counties just will not integrate for some reason. Some counties we have chosen not to integrate with because of either infrastructure of their technology and or the data, and we want to make sure that we're validating and verifying the data for data security reasons. So there are some counties that we just won't integrate with as well. So it'll never quite get to 100%. But I think that's where I would start and understand, okay, if that is the case, right? Are we seeing this repetitively in certain counties? And then work with you to understand, okay, let's go back to that risk tolerance versus risk mitigation standpoint. And are there alternatives? In some states, can we flip that to a statewide search where we believe the data is just as good on the statewide search and doesn't take quite as long as a historically long county. So if it's a county that historically has 5, 7, day turnaround times or something of that nature, if the statewide is being returned in 3 days on average, that may be a better alternative, right? And so I think that's where we would work through that with you. I know you asked, I know the question was, what is there anything we can do? But I think it truly is a collaborative effort to ensure that that we're working through and understanding the challenge. I would add though that if we can start with quality information, right, by running the identity verification, that might be a good place that where they can start and controlling the process to make sure that again good information is going in versus questionable information if we're not doing an identity verification. So those are just some of the areas that I would recommend. But by all means, we would love to have a deeper conversation in that instance. If that is a client, we would welcome that conversation. And if it's not a client, we would certainly welcome that conversation to help advise on what can be done.
Absolutely. Good plug on identity, because that's the next question. Does identity verification show as a component of the overall background check order? So does it, when you're looking at the entire background check, where does it show up?
So let me punt that one, and
Okay.
we will make sure that we provide that information. It does say verified, but I want to make sure that we get the exact right answer on that. So let me punt it, and we'll make sure that we provide the right information.
Okay, perfect. And then just some things coming in around like wanting to learn more about our products and services.
Yeah,
Do not worry. If you are commenting that, we will reach out to you. And for everyone else that didn't comment that, but wants to learn more, please reach out directly to us. Happy to have conversations, client, not client. Really excited to talk to everyone after this.
absolutely.
So at this time, no further questions. And if questions come in right this second, we will follow up with you right after the show. I promise. That happens like all the time. I'm like, no more questions. They come in. So Kurt, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. So much information. Like I said, just doing the basics sometimes is really, really critical. We had an engaging audience. Clearly, people wanted to know more. We will continue to give you more information, obviously. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today on Sterling Live. Thank you to our audience, whether you're watching live right now or on demand later. But yeah, thanks, Kurt. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. It was a blast. hopefully it was a good opportunity for everyone to understand again a little bit of the basics, and even if you knew a lot of that, hopefully it provided a bit of additional perspective on how we view some things, and some of the examples made some sense to you. So I truly appreciate the opportunity, Caitlin, and the great opportunity to talk to all of the folks that took the time to listen today.
Absolutely. Well, that being said, thank you everyone, and I will catch you on the next episode of Sterling Live.